you've got a pretty extensive background leading some of these biggest spirit brands in the world. So if I came to you, told you I was planning on launching a new brand in the spirit space, this is my first foray into the space, and I'm about to kick off packaging design specifically. What are 3 to 5 frameworks or tips that you'd give me, or things to watch out for that might trip me up as I'm starting to approach this part of the project?
This is my favorite question, I think. Number one, you want to be differentiated, but in a good way. Too often there's like a code in beverage alcohol in particular where it's like, oh, if you're a rye whiskey, you're going to be green. Or if you're a tequila, you're going to be in the green and teal and gold white space. I think if you're sitting on a shelf, whether it's on a bar or in a store, you want to pop. So differentiating is one, standing out is two. They're the same thing, but I want you to be visible.
Hmm.
Differentiating and being visible are a little two different things, especially when you're in a dark bar, staring at 200 bottles.
Yeah.
But it has to make sense, if you're throwing hot pink and purple on the label for a product that's a legacy brand that's, aged for 10 years and is targeting a certain demographic that doesn't make sense for, then that's not the right call. So differentiate, be visible. And the third thing I would say is think ahead. Do you know how, and a lot of people don't want to think about this because there's such a focus on urgency and speed and, now is better than perfect, good is better than perfect. But you really want to, and I always get this term wrong, and you can correct me, is it a hierarchy or a system? Like there's an approach to creating packaging for multiple products in a portfolio so that they connect in a very clear way to the consumer, but they're
Hmm.
also different enough that you know that you're getting a higher proof point or a different flavor.
Right.
So I think those are the three most important things to be
Those
thinking
those
about.
all make a lot of sense. Let's just say there's like an employee in the back of house. They need to go back and restock, and it makes it harder if they can't look if a jars or a bottles are sitting in their case pack of like 10 bottles as an example, and is it designed where they can look straight down within that box to pull out and see which flavor this is or which SKU this is versus they have to actually pull the whole thing out of the box and look at the side of the panel, like just as an example, like anything that comes to mind that's not so much it's maybe like customer consumer facing. It's more like on the operational, like back of house side of things that people may not think about. That I think in a lot of ways, if you can make a on premise or off premise customer make their lives easier from this point of view, like anything that's like not so mainstream that you might overlook, that might actually be important to consider on that front, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. You know, I think you want to always think about function over fashion. So you've got to think about the entire life cycle of a product before it gets to the purchaser's hand and even afterwards. You need to make sure that the beautiful label that you've designed is going to stick on the bottle through bottling, putting in a box, being shipped in a hot truck, whether it's overseas or over a border or just across, the street. You need to make sure that the boxes are easy to read and that it's easy to open, and that as the product is being pulled in and out of the out of the box, you're not pulling and ripping and scraping. I have one shipping partner who's been using bubble wrap with the adhesive on the back to wrap our bottles to ship, and then when we pull it off, the paper label comes off. You also I've experienced this with Santo and our repackaging in 2023, as well as with some other brands at Brown Forman. The package needs to be easy to handle, especially for bartenders and home bartenders. A lot of times when you have these wide packages with shoulders, they get turned to the side on the shelf at home or in a bar or restaurant or in a store, and you can't even see what the brand is. So if you think that that's going to happen, you need to make sure your branding's on the side of the bottle too. And it needs to be easy to open and pour from. I think that gets
Yeah,
overlooked a
good
lot,
point.
especially with designers who aren't familiar with the on-premise space and who might have never been a bartender and isn't thinking about high volume pours and things like that. Even when we're doing sampling events at big festivals, it's important that we have some accuracy and we're not making a big mess because that's wasteful.
Yeah.
There was one other thought I had about that. that the closure is of high quality. Because if you've got a cork or a stopper that is glued onto a cap and you're, opening and closing many times, or if there's heat involved, if it's a glue of some kind, like that can be, it's a real turnoff for people, especially when they're buying a $40+ bottle of anything. So
Yeah.
just think through the entire bottom to top, inside out, especially of the bottle or the jar, and think about all of the elements, the natural elements it might be exposed to, whether that's weather or human contact.
You said you position like thinking about the entire life cycle of the package. I think that's a really good way to look at it. I think these are the type of things that I think of, especially someone who's building a brand that's the first time in the space, a lot of stuff they wouldn't really think about, which they might have to go back and redo later. So I think this is really helpful.
I would also say that it's important to think in a multisensory way. You do want it to look pretty, but you want it to feel good and you want it to,
Like the texture of the bottle or something along those lines, right? Yeah.
yep, totally.